I'd like to ask the following questions of the legal counsel on the lottery bill. First, how many lottery winners above the threshold that's in the legislation in the United States are enrolled in Medicaid?
There's not a national survey. However, one state that we've engaged with found 6,000 lottery winners who were part of a household receiving Medicaid. And of that group, about 200 individuals had winnings of $20,000 or more.
How many
So
in what state?
That would be illustrative. 6,000 lottery winners who were receiving or were part of a household receiving Medicaid.
Above the at the threshold and above?
Sorry?
The threshold that's in the bill, $20,000.
That would be individuals on Medicaid. We don't have
How many?
national
From
data
where?
on how many would be above the threshold.
So you have no national numbers for a basis in the bill? Because we don't know. I think that's what you're telling me. You can't tell us how many lottery winners above the threshold that's in the bill across the country are enrolled in Medicaid.
Well, as the chairman pointed out, and as you know well, Medicaid data is challenging in its timeliness, accuracy, and completeness.
Yeah, but it's also the responsibility of legislation to have foundational information from which to move from. My next question is...
If the gentlelady might yield...
Ms. Esho.
I will, once I finish my questions. I'd be glad to whomever wants to say something. Do states today have the flexibility to adjust for lump sum payments?
No.
Well, in the statute, CMS, it says that CMS requires that enrollees notify the state Medicaid agency immediately if they have a change of circumstance that affects their eligibility, and CMS additionally requires that states annually redetermine Medicaid eligibility as part of that process, that states may adopt a reasonable method to include a prorated portion of reasonably predicted future income to account for increases or decreases in future income. So you're saying that there is not any flexibility on the part of states today, and that's why the bill mandates what it mandates?
The issue that the bill seeks to address is that under the Affordable Care Act, which mandated the use of modified adjusted gross income for large portions of the Medicaid program, certain populations, not all populations, that lump sum payments, including lottery winnings, are only counted in the month that they're received.
Is this
So an
bill
individual
scored?
could be disenrolled from the program in 1
Is this
month.
bill scored?
This particular version, there have been, as you know, multiple versions
Has
introduced.
the bill
in
been
price
scored?
Congress. So there are, we have had
You
initial
can just say
conversations.
yes or no.
We've had initial conversations with the Congressional Budget Office, but on various iterations.
Has it been scored?
We have not requested an
Okay.
official score at this time.
Now, this was mentioned earlier. In the state of Michigan, in 2015, the total amount of garnishments collected by lottery was $380.67. And I think that that's very important to place on the record. Well, I mean, I'd welcome $380.67 in my checking account, but I wouldn't consider that a standout. And that's a major state in our country. So I think that the answers of the council, where there is not something foundational that tells us what we're pursuing, how widespread is this? A major state in the union in 2015, the total amount of garnishments collected by a lottery was $380.67. I don't think the bill has been scored, and we really don't know how many people we're talking about in the country above the threshold that's in the bill. So if this is reform, I would say that it seems to be a pebble in the sand, in my view, because the council can't give me anything meaty, so I'll yield. Who wanted time?
Chair thanks the
there's
gentlelady.
3 seconds, so there's not that much to yield. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Time is expired.
Just strike the last word, and I know we've already passed this.
Gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you.
Chair does observe the bill has passed.
Yeah, it has passed. I just want to briefly say a couple things. First of all, this gives the estates the authority to collect once those winnings are made, which they don't really have that ability today. Second, I would note that in our long deliberation on the 21st century cures, of which, again, I want to compliment every member of this committee for their support, you'll recall that we had sizable sums for a variety of things, including the Bo Biden moonshot, the precision medicine, fight on opioids, more money for the NIH. And one of the challenges that we had from the get-go was that we had to come up with pay-fors for all of that. And actually, we had to come up with 2 sets of pay-fors because the first set was, is that what I say, stolen by the Senate, and we had to come up with the second version. One of the things that we talked about but did not have unanimous support on both sides of the aisle was money from states where you had lottery winners. And there were some versions of this bill that CBO did score that, as I recall, those numbers were in the hundreds of millions of dollars that CBO gave us. So whereas this bill has, was just introduced last week, CBO is a great institution, but they often aren't able to turn around literally within a couple of legislative days. I know that eventually we will get a score, but in fact, it was pointed out and not included as part of the cures bill, but hundreds of millions of dollars is not a sizable, is not a minimal amount that you ought to turn your back on. And for those of us that want this program to be targeted towards the most vulnerable, and clearly it is, when you have pretty sizable winning that I would guess that not a one of us would turn our back on, $80,000 or more, that ought to be included as part of the financial wherewithal of that individual or family that receives it in that year that they received it. So I just want to make that part of the record, and I
Would the gentleman yield?
yield to the chairman of the full committee.
I thank the gentleman for clarifying, because that was sort of the predicate for moving forward on this legislation. We didn't anticipate that the opposition from the other side against getting quote-unquote bad actors out of the system, as Mr. Green referred to them, would be so controversial, especially when we had these scores showing hundreds of millions of dollars in potential savings. And we circulated this morning, and I think this morning, a draft amendment that maybe in full committee we can earn some bipartisan support for, that would take those savings, that the only scores we've had from CBO indicators in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and target some of that toward tobacco cessation benefits in Medicaid for moms with newborns. See, this is about making choices between bad actors and lottery winners and people with big lump sum payments, and saving money, cleaning up what we think is a loophole, and putting that money to a better purpose. So I would hope, even though you've described this, the Democrats describe this as not doing anything or doing too much. I can't figure out which. On the one hand, you say it doesn't save anything. On the other hand, you say it destroys Medicaid, neither of which are correct. I think we should make some good choices here, and we have that opportunity. We're going to take these a step at a time, issue by issue, and then we'll see where people are. But let's do the right thing for the American people. This saves hundreds of millions of dollars potentially. We can help new moms to get off tobacco, especially new moms with kids. Isn't that a better choice? I think it is. That's what I hope we can build bipartisan support for that amendment when we get to full committee. I commend the gentleman from Michigan for bringing this issue forward. This ought to be a no-brainer, and we're going to move forward on it. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of your time.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back my, Dr. Bucshon?
Yeah, can I get?
Yield my, balancing my time to Dr. Bucshon.
I just want to say briefly that since I've been in Congress, no matter the subject, I've always heard that a small amount of the taxpayer dollar isn't worth spending in the appropriate way, and that's how we've ended up in $20 trillion in debt and with large deficits. So the argument that small dollar amounts from my constituents that are not being spent properly is not an argument that I agree with, and so I hope that we move this through the full committee. I yield back.